Hey everyone, this is Meyer, and in this video what I'm going to be doing is using Icarus to make a big trance supersaw lead. This is the first in my series of videos on sound design with Icarus. We'll kind of be building up a mini track. What I like to do here to show you how cool this synth is, and it's really one of my favorites. It's just excellent. So this is the sound we're going to be making. And as you can see, I have the mod wheel mapped to the filter. Anyway, you get the idea. Let's go ahead and get started making it. So to get started, what I've done is started with a blank project, and I've added in the MIDI that I want to use. I'm basically using the melody from one of my other YouTube videos where I talk about how you can use chord tabs to make up your melody. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and load up Icarus like so. And what we're going to do is just initialize the patch. So I'm going to click the init button here and init the patch, which will initialize everything. Now, by default, right now, it's going to start with some EQ. So I'm going to turn all of this off so that everything is bypassed. And let's go ahead and take this melody that I have and put it on the synth. It's not going to sound like much now because it's just a basic saw waveform, but we'll start shaping the sound here in a second. First thing I'm realizing is I want to bump this up an octave. So I'm going to bump the octave up to 1. And we're going to change this mode from mono to turn on the unison. Now, what I like using is, for this sound, I'm going to try to use the Super Stereo 14. The Supersaw modes are all based off the Roland JP 8000 or 8080. The Hypersaw is more based on the Virus, and you have some other modes as well. So I really like this one. It's just insane. So we'll start with this, and this adjusts the detune. And already I can hear the sound start to come together. Let's go ahead and adjust the volume envelope. So I'm going to take the sustain. It's already at about 50%, which is what I want. I'm going to take this decay down to maybe about 0.3 and bump the release up to maybe about 0.7. And what this is going to do, as long as the shape is concave like this, it'll kind of die very quickly. It'll almost give it a kind of plucky sound. So the stereo mode, because basically Icarus has stereo filters, you can have stereo oscillators or mono oscillators. So I'm really liking the way that's sounding. What I'm going to do is add another octave or another oscillator an octave up. So I'm going to go to Tools, copy oscillator, the current oscillator, to oscillator 2. And what we're going to do is bump this up to octave 2, and I'm going to just mix it in. It's not going to be as loud as this one, but this will just add that kind of high frequency punch to it, and it really makes a difference. It's good, in my view, to have these kind of layers. I like that. We may detune this a little bit more. And what can help too is sometimes detuning these off of each other. So I may take the fine on this down to -4 and bring this one up to 4 as well. Already this is coming together very nicely. What I'm going to do is turn on oscillator 3, and I want to set this to noise. So what I'm going to do under the kind of morph mode or synthesis mode, I'm going to set this to white noise like this. Now this is going to start off being very loud. So I want this to be, this is going to stay in mono, which means the noise is going to be right down the middle, but I want to automate the volume with an envelope. Now I could use an auxiliary envelope. I could use, they have these basically these built-in envelopes that have a certain decay, which is really helpful. I'm going to use auxiliary envelope 1 because I'm not really going to be using this for anything. So Here we can adjust how much. We don't need it to be that much. We just want this initial noise to cut through and add a little bit of click. So I'm going to turn the release down. I'm going to turn the shape up like this, and we're just going to decrease this decay until I think you can hear that noise kind of punching through. It's subtle, but it's there and it's helping it punch through a little bit. So I do like that. I am going to keep that there. Now let's move on to the filter. We're going to use filter 1, and we need to choose a filter mode. Now the Virus has a 24 dB per octave filter, so I like this butter filter. I also like the tone 2 filters that you see as well. We can start with this butter filter, and I may decide after a certain point I want to switch to a 12 dB per octave filter, but it just depends kind of how aggressive you want it to cut off the sound. Maybe add a little bit of resonance. And at this point, what can really help is adding the filter envelope. So by default, the filter envelope is pretty much already ready to go. So all we need to do is just add this knob in the positive direction or the negative direction, but here I'm going to do it in the positive direction to basically add a little bit of click to the sound, especially when it's closed. When it's open all the way, what's going to happen is it's going to try to close it more, but it has nowhere to go. It's already past kind of the end of the spectrum, so to speak. So when it's down here, this is what we want to adjust. So I'm adjusting the decay to be about maybe 0.5, 0.6 seconds. I like where that is. And at this point, we can adjust the mod wheel to be mapped to the cutoff, which is also this macro, which is really nice. So the way I tend to do this is I start with the lowest point I would want it to be, and this would be like your lowest point in the breakdown. That's good. We click on this and drag, and we can then map it to the cutoff. Now what we want to do is set the maximum point. So this would be the maximum positive modulation. And we can adjust this knob, this kind of little ring that comes here, very similar to a lot of the synths you see with Serum and Massive. This will be the maximum value when it's open all the way. And now when I close the modulation wheel, it's already just sounding absolutely incredible. I think there is maybe a little bit too much noise, so I may just bring this down a little bit. So once again, this auxiliary envelope 1 is adjusting the volume of the noise, so I can back it off a little bit so that its maximum value is basically how loud the noise is right when the note starts. Yeah, I think that's better. Now at this point, we could add a little bit of EQ. I could add some highs, but it is a pretty bright sound, so I may add some mids, but maybe I'll give it a dB or 2 in the high end. Let's see what it sounds like. Okay, 1 dB is good, and let's see, there might be a place in the mids that sound good, maybe lower down the frequency range as well. Yeah, I really like how that sounds. And this is completely dry. There's no reverb, there's no delay, not yet. And to me, it's already sounding fantastic. So let's go over to the effects. And what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to add a delay, and I'm going to choose ping pong. I'm going to use effects 2. And I'm going to bring the mix down maybe to 20%. We'll probably have to back it off even more, bump up the feedback a little bit, and turn down the dampening. And let me go ahead and put this here so we can hear the kind of the tail part. Okay, I'm liking where that is going. What I may do is just add a new pattern here at the end so that we can kind of hear what the delay tail sounds like. Doesn't need to be a lot. I may still bump up the feedback a little bit, but it doesn't need to be crazy. And maybe I'll turn up the damping just a little bit, because that's, once again, this damping is going to just cut off the highs a little bit of the delay tail. So you may want more of the mids, because I don't want the delay tail to interfere with that click or the top part of the note, but I do want to kind of put the sound in some space. Now we're going to move over to the reverb. I'm going to go ahead and start with this big reverb, but I really like the plate reverb here in Icarus. It just sounds incredible to me. So we're going to start with the big reverb, but I may switch to the plate reverb just because I like the way it sounds a lot. So let's start from the beginning. So the damping is going to control how much of the high frequencies are attenuated. The decay is how long the tail is, and then the size is like the size of the room. So this will also make the sound like it's in a bigger space the more we bump it up, but it doesn't need to be that big. Even though we want to have a big trance reverb on it, it just doesn't need to be, you know, like 100 meters. That's just a massive room. So let's take a listen, add a little bit of this reverb in. So this is sounding good. I may add a little bit of dampening, and this mix is good. Now, one of the cool things you can do, you can actually add reverb ducking, which will duck the sound whenever the sound is playing. When it's actually going on, it won't play the effect as much. So this is the amount. And usually what I would do is use a compressor, and this is a lot better than using a compressor because it'll just duck the reverb. Maybe it uses compression in the back end. I'm not 100% sure. But this is just really nice because that allows that initial transient to cut through, and then you can bump up the reverb a little bit more when the sound isn't playing, so you get that nice tail. I'm super happy with the way this is sounding. The last thing I'm going to do is adjust this mod wheel here to the resonance. And what I want it to do is, as the filter opens, I don't want as much resonance. So I'm going to just bring this down like this. If you keep going past it, sometimes it'll turn red. But yeah, basically what this will do is, as I open the filter, the resonance is going to go down. That's why it's going in the negative direction. So this is like 0, and this is like some positive value. So if the yellow goes in the negative direction, it means as the mod wheel increases in value, the cutoff will open, but then the resonance will go down. So that's kind of visually how you can see it. And you have this nice little visual guide here in the mod matrix as well. And at this point I can... And what I'm doing is bumping up the high. Because we turn the resonance down, it's not quite as bright, so I wanted to add a little bit more of that brightness back. And with that, I'm actually really happy with the way this sound sounds. What I may do is kind of basically just add this here, and I'm going to take the mod wheel and I'm just going to modulate it. So what I can do here, there are a couple ways to do this, but probably the easiest is just wiggle the mod wheel, tools, last tweaked, and create automation clip, and that's what we're going to see. This here is the modulation wheel. So what we can do is emulate this kind of coming in during a breakdown, and then right here at bar 17, this is going to be at its maximum value. So that's that big hands in the air moment that you would hear. So let's go ahead and listen to what this sounds like. And what I may do is select these notes and make them a little longer. Honestly, that's sounding great to me. I think this is really going to be going on the right track. In the next video, what I'll do is make a sub pad that will sit underneath this, especially for the breakdown. Then what we'll do is we'll add a kick and a sub bass after for when that main drop section is. So see you then.